Good afternoon. Again, my name is Terry Glavin. I want to welcome you this afternoon to the workshop, Doing Business with the City of Chicago. I want to thank you on behalf of Mayor Rahm Emanuel and Commissioner Jamie Reed, the Chief Procurement Officer for the City of Chicago. We want to thank you for taking time out of your work schedules to be here to learn about doing business with the city. I'm going to do my best to make the next hour productive for you. If you would, reserve questions till the very end. I'm going to stick around. We're going to do a question and answer session at the end. But by doing that, we'll be able to cover a lot more material in the meantime. And then at the end, if you have questions, we will cover those. Before I get too far, I want to let you know that I'm here to give you as much information as I can in a short time, but I'm an ongoing resource for you, just like all the staff members of the Department of Procurement Services. So please feel free to take down my contact information, which I'll give you right now. And in the future, if you have a question, whether it's about today's session or whether it's just about a new topic that comes up, you can reach out to me. And if I can answer your question, I will do so. If I'm not the best resource at the city, I will find the best resource for you and refer you to that person or that group. And between all our efforts, we'll make sure we get answers to all of your questions. So if you want to reach out to me, you can contact me by email. My email is my name at cityofchicago.org. So it's Terrence, Terrence, .glavin at cityofchicago.org. I'll remind you, this session is being streamed online. This will be a video on YouTube. It will stay on YouTube. So if there's anything you missed today, including the spelling of my email address, you can go online, you can double check and get the information you may have missed. A phone number where you can reach me at my office is 312-744-0851. Feel free to email or call in the future, and I'll be glad to assist you. Now, we're going to cover a number of topics today. Keep in mind there's quite a few workshops that the Department of Procurement Services puts on. I put on a number of the workshops myself. We have other staff members with certain areas of expertise. They put on other workshops. So if a topic's not covered today, check the workshop schedule. There's one posted outside. There's one posted online at cityofchicago.org/procurement. And between all the different workshops, we hope to cover the topics that are of interest to you. But the topics today, we're going to talk a little bit about the mission statement of the Department of Procurement Services, laws governing the procurement process. There was a question from an audience member already today about where you can find codes, perhaps policies and procedures. I'm going to point you in that direction. We're going to talk about types of procurement, a little bit about certification, contract monitoring and compliance, programs and bid incentives, navigating the DPS website, and a question and answer session at the end. Again, these topics, some of them I will cover in more detail than others, and the reason for that is that if there's another workshop that covers one of the topics in fine detail, there's not as much need to spend as much time as perhaps other areas where there's not a workshop that covers it. So some topics are going to spend a little more time on, other topics a little bit less. If I spend a little bit less, I'm going to flag it as a topic that perhaps is covered by another workshop, and that'll cue you to check the workshop schedule. In addition to just the technical side of doing business with the City of Chicago, what I hope to do along the way is to flag certain tips, provide maybe some insight so that you can gain some practical knowledge out of this workshop as well as the technical knowledge I hope to deliver. So, the mission statement of the Department of Procurement Services. We are the contracting authority for the City of Chicago. Now, I want to point out to you something important that you need to remember. If you're doing business with the City of Chicago, you have to, for the most part, do business through a contract. We put the contracts into place so that there's a business relationship formed between you, the business entity, the business owner, and the City of Chicago. Once that contract's in place, your customer is going to be one or several of the departments at the City of Chicago. And once we have that contract in place, that business relationship formed by that contract is very similar to the business relationship you would have with a customer or client in the private sector. But before we can get that contract into place, we follow a process that is unique to government. And the reason the process is unique to government is because by law, contracts are, for the most part, awarded to vendors through a competitive process. And what that does is that gives everyone an equal playing field, an equal opportunity to compete for contracts, and it creates a predictable process so that when you enter the process, you have certain expectations and you know that the outcome is going to be consistent with your expectations. You may not win the contract you're competing for every time. That's the nature of a competition. You may not always win, but at least you know that the process that you went through when you went through the competition for the contract, you'll know it was fair and you know you had an equal opportunity, a fair chance to do business with the City of Chicago. Again, we're the contracting authority for the City of Chicago, and here's a practical note. There are sister agencies out there. You know, when you're in the environment of the City of Chicago, there's a lot going on, right? There's trains going by, there's parks, people playing in the parks, there's recreational activities, there's conventions going on at Metropolitan Pier and Exposition Authority. There are a lot of moving parts. Those moving parts require purchasing of goods and services. We put contracts into place for the City of Chicago, but a lot of those moving parts are actually in motion due to what we call sister agencies. Now, sister agencies include Metropolitan Pier and Exposition Authority, the Chicago Transit Authority, and other governmental units that keep the city moving. Those other governmental units have their own contracting authority. They have their own procurement departments. They have their own policies, procedures. They advertise their opportunities on their own websites through their own newspaper ads. So the practical tip is don't miss out just focusing on City of Chicago opportunities. Keep in mind that there are other opportunities that are available through sister agencies. And between those opportunities and those available at the City of Chicago, you can take advantage of perhaps a larger portion of city business. I mentioned that the procurement process is governed by law. Now, there are several, levels or layers of law that may apply. If there's even one federal dollar involved in the purchase, then it's considered federally funded. If it's federally funded, federal laws may apply. If there's no federal dollars involved, or even if there are federal dollars involved, state law will apply, and perhaps law of the Chicago Municipal Code. So where do you find those laws? Well, if you want to, you can go to the law library and look them up. But if you don't have that kind of time on your hands because you're busy running your business ventures, then you can go to any search engine. You can type in the Illinois Municipal Purchasing Act, and within the first page of search results, you're going to be able to pull up the statute that covers the laws of the state that govern purchasing in Illinois. For the City of Chicago, there's a section specifically for cities with population over 500,000 people. We fall in that category, so that's the section that applies to us. Within that framework of state law, the Chicago Municipal Code creates our department and creates a more detailed structure for our process. That municipal code section is 2-92 of the Chicago Municipal Code. If you'd like to take a look at it, you can go to amlegal.com. That's amlegal.com. That's an authorized publisher of the Chicago Municipal Code. And you can go there. It's very user-friendly. There's a map. You click on the map, maybe click on the state of Illinois. It'll bring down a bunch of municipalities and governmental units. You find Chicago, click on that, and it'll open up a window that gives municipal code sections. And you'll look down the list to 2-92, click on that, and that entire section of the code, 2-92, and all its subparts, create our authority, gives us details as far as what programs we have, what our procurement process is supposed to look like, basically how we're supposed to put contracts into place. Now, even more narrow is if you want to look at the policies and procedures that we live by. We create policies and procedures within the state law municipal code. Those policies and procedures are available at cityofchicago.org/procurement. And just wander around. Our procurement webpage, and you'll be able to find a great deal, including policies and procedures that govern our process. If you're having any difficulty finding policies and procedures on our website, feel free to reach out to me through my contact information, and I'll be glad to assist you. Now, when we make purchases, we break down purchasing into categories, right? Even in your business, it's helpful to break things down into categories. And what we do is we break purchases down into, at the highest level, purchases of goods and purchases of services. And then services is broken down even further into professional services or highly skilled services and work services. And depending on what we're buying, whether it's goods, professional services, work services, we choose a certain type of procurement process to get a contract into place. And those various types of process allow us to put the appropriate contract into place. If we're buying goods, we typically award through a competitive bid process. By law, we award typically to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, and I'll explain what that means in a little bit. If we're looking for professional services, we typically award an agreement or a contract by way of request for proposal or an RFP process. If we're looking for a pool of vendors, we do it through an RFQ or request for qualification process. And if we're completing a construction project, typically small to medium size, we go through what's called a job order contracting process, or we call it JOC. Now, one last way we break down purchasing is if what we're buying is above or below $100,000. If it's above $100,000, it's considered a regular or large order. If it's below $100,000, it's considered a small order. By law, small orders under $100,000 have a little bit more of a flexible process as far as solicitation of bids. So we break down what it is we're buying. We have to choose a process that we are going to follow. Now, for small orders, if it's under $100,000, quotes may be solicited by telephone, fax, or written quotation, and the solicitation could be posted on the website. So if you're looking to do business with the City of Chicago, this is a reminder. Check the Department of Procurement Services webpage for opportunities. Small orders and large orders opportunities can be located on our webpage. City of Chicago certified MBEWBE vendors are solicited first, and MBEWBE compliance is required for bids over $10,000 but under $100,000. Now, just a show of hands, who's familiar with what MBEWBE means? Okay, most of the room, but not all. Now, there are separate workshops that talk all about MBEWBE certification and also compliance for prime contractors. But what I can tell you in the amount of time we have is MBE stands for Minority Business Enterprise. WBE stands for Women-Owned Business Enterprise. And there's a slide later that gives more detail. There are other certifications as well. If there's a federally funded project, then MBEs and WBEs are more or less categorized under one designation, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, or DBE. If a project is out at the airport and it involves concessions, then it's ACDBE, Airport Concession Disadvantaged Business Enterprise. There's also BEPD, that's Business Enterprises owned by people with disabilities. We have programs for all these different certifications. What I want to point to at this point in the workshop is how does it benefit historically disadvantaged groups? Well, if you get your certification as an MBE or a WBE, then, for example, with small orders, you're solicited first for the small orders in this category. Also, you could participate, and a prime contractor could get meet compliance by having MBEs and WBEs as subcontractors. And there are goals through the MBEWBE programs where MBE and WBE firms are to participate on contracts as subcontractors or as primes in certain percentage of the contract dollars. For example, say for example a project is advertised and a vendor picks up, and the vendor is not a certified MBE or WBE firm, and they pick up the solicitation, they read about the opportunity, and part of the potential contract is MBE, WBE participation is required in the amount of 25% MBE, 5% WBE. Well, what does all that mean? It basically means that an MBE firm will get subcontracting work for at least 25% of the contract dollars and do actual work for those dollars. A WBE firm will participate as a subcontractor for 5% in that example, do 5% of real work in exchange for 5% of real dollars. So if you have a $100,000 contract that you bid on, you won the contract, and you're going to do $100,000 worth of work for the city, in my example, you would need to bring on an MBE firm to perform $25,000 worth of your $100,000 contract and a WBE firm to perform $5,000 of real work on your $100,000 contract. And that's a very quick, brief summary. There's workshops that get into a lot greater detail about how to get certified. Once you're certified, what do you do with that certification? How do you benefit from it? There's workshops on if you're a prime, if you're not certified, but you're bringing in MBE and WBE firms. How do you do it? How do you meet compliance? So there are other workshops that cover those topics, but it's important to know about it. Practical note though, if you're eligible for MBE or WBE certification, you don't have to have a contract or even a contract in mind to get the application process started. In fact, I encourage whoever might be eligible, if they want to get certified, to get started on the certification application process immediately so that they are ready when an opportunity comes along. Also, you might be eligible for certification and choose not to get it. You don't have to be certified just because you're eligible in order to bid on a contract. So if you're eligible and you either don't want to apply for certification, or you're eligible and you're in process of getting your certification and you see an opportunity out there, don't be afraid to bid on it just because you're not certified. You just won't get the benefit of the certification until you're actually certified. Okay. Now, competitive bids over $100,000. We advertise these opportunities in the Sun-Times. By law, we have to advertise in a newspaper with a certain size circulation. We advertise in the classified ads section. So if you look in the classified ads section and you see grids of opportunities from different agencies, we're going to be one of those agencies with an advertisement. It'll give you a brief description of what it is that a project's about. It's not going to give you all the details, but it's going to more or less whet your appetite, give you enough detail. For example, it might just say, City of Chicago is soliciting bids for purchase of police cars. Well, if you sell hardware, you're going to see that. You're not going to be interested. But if you sell police cars, then it'll spur you to come on down, pick up a bid package, and the bid package will contain all those details of what the project's about. And then you can determine whether or not you want to bid on that project. You can also see opportunities, as I mentioned, at cityofchicago.org/procurement. You can pick up hard copies of the opportunity lists here in the bid and bond room at City Hall, room 103. Bid solicitation period is 10 to 30 calendar days, and keep in mind there might be a bid fee. Usually there's not a bid fee, but also there might be a bid deposit that might be part of the opportunity. There also might be a required bid bond. How do you know when something's required and when something is not required? It's all going to be in that bid package. So there's a practical tip for you when you're doing business with the city. It all starts with that bid package. When you pick up that bid package, it's going to include specifications. You need to read every line of those specifications if you plan on bidding. Because within those specifications, you're going to see a whole bunch of instructions, not just the opportunity, but instructions about how to bid. And if you fail to cross a T where you have to cross a T, dot an I, if you fail to sign a page that requires signature, if you fail to submit the bid on time, you might have your bid rejected. So you put all that work into preparing your bid, and it gets rejected on a technicality. That's a shame for you, waste of your time. It's a shame for us, because if you are the lowest bidder, and we have to reject your bid because of a technicality, then we have to go to the next lowest bidder. So we're spending more, but by law, we may have to do that because of a technical reason for rejecting your lowest bid. So cross your T's, dot your I's, read every line of a bid package, make sure you do everything you're asked to do when you submit a bid. Now, when there's a bid opportunity, there might be a pre-bid conference. If there's going to be one, we will tell you so in the bid package. What is a pre-bid conference? It's an opportunity for the vendors, after having reviewed the specifications, to come in, go over the specifications with our department, address any concerns regarding the specifications, have questions answered. Bidders, it's optional whether they need to attend, unless it says in the specifications you must attend. So keep that in mind, because if you fail to attend a pre-bid that is mandatory, that could be a basis for rejecting your bid. And why would we do such a thing? Well, some projects require vendors to come in to make sure they get the information about a project. Sometimes there's a site inspection that's required for a vendor to really understand the project. They might have to go out to a site and actually view what they're going to be working on, so their bid is meaningful, so they really do know what the project's about. So there's a number of reasons why we may require it. But if it's not required, it's optional. You don't have to show up. But if you do, come on in with questions. We'll provide answers. When there are questions, the questions may result in one of two things. One could be a clarification. Clarification is where our specifications are fine, but we just need to clarify something for all the vendors. Maybe give a little more detail so that vendors understand what we're getting at with our specifications. Now, sometimes a question raises a flaw in the specifications. We do our best, but once in a while, there might be an error in our specifications, and a vendor actually picks up on it and lets us know at the pre-bid. We might issue an addenda where we give notice to everybody. We're changing the specifications in a little way. And then those addenda have to be acknowledged, initialed, or signed, whatever the specs say, and submitted with your bid so that we know you were aware of the changes that came through the addendum. Okay, I talked about, I got a little bit ahead of myself. I talked about site inspections, but sometimes site inspections occur. They may be optional, they may be mandatory. Now, if there's no pre-bid, if there's no site inspection, keep in mind, on the bid package documents, we do identify who the manager of the project is. So you can reach out and ask your questions. You can contact our department and get questions answered. If the question rises to a level where we need to do a clarification or addendum, we will do that, perhaps based on a call-in as well, in addition to if there was one that came through a pre-bid. I can't emphasize this enough. If you're going to do business with the City of Chicago, complete the bid documents accurately and thoroughly. Fill in all required information. Certain bid documents must be submitted and executed with the bid. If not, the bid could be rejected. Sign and execute the documents. Make sure wherever you need a notary, there is a notary. Now, why do we require all this? By law, you have to be the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. What does that mean? Lowest bid, we all know, I think, what that means. It means you have to come in at the best price compared to the other bidders, right? But what does it mean to be responsible? It means that you're presently capable of delivering in accordance with the specifications. Basically, you're capable presently of delivering what we want the way we want it. Being responsive is delivering what we want the way we want it, including the actual bid documents that you submit. So your responsiveness doesn't start just the day you begin work. Once you have the contract, your responsiveness is being considered the day you submit a bid. So you have to be responsive the day you submit your bid. Do everything the way we ask. Where a document says you must do this, you must sign here, that means you must. You don't have the option to not do it. We typically don't throw around the words may or could. Sometimes we do, but keep in mind there are those differences, right? Must means you have to. Include any bid deposit in the proper form. Cash is not accepted. Bid deposit, usually 5% of the bid, normally refundable, maybe required for some bids. There might be a bid fee, which is non-refundable, maybe required for some projects. Typically, we don't do bid fees. On the occasion we do it, it's usually a really large construction project, and I'm talking about millions and millions of dollars, where our administrative costs of reviewing bids is substantially higher, and it sort of remediates those costs a little bit by requiring a bid fee. But it's rare, but keep an eye out in the bid documents just in case. Be timely when you submit your bid, before 11 a.m. on the bid opening date. When we receive the bids, we literally open the bids, read them aloud. They're due by the time listed in the specification. If you are a minute late, your bid might be subject to a rejection. So it is a serious deadline. Make sure you make the deadline. It'd be a shame to waste your time preparing your bid and to be a minute late and have your bid rejected based on timeliness. Bid opening is Monday through Friday, except major holidays, at 11 a.m. at City Hall here in the bid and bond room. Bids are literally opened and read aloud. Once they're read aloud, we tabulate them and we review them for accuracy, and we post the tabulated bids online, typically within 24 hours of bid opening. So when you submit a bid, you can actually see what your competition bid by looking online at bid tabulations. As far as projects that you're not even bidding on, it is a useful source of business intelligence to check out bid tabulations in general, and you can see what vendors in your industry have been bidding on projects that you might be interested in. Because keep in mind, contracts have a life, right? Some are 3 years, some are 5 years, but contracts always come to an end. So just because you perform a certain service that you'd like to sell to the city, or just because you sell a certain good that you like to sell to the city, and you look and you find there's already a contract for that with the city. Don't be discouraged, because that contract will eventually come to an end. And it's a good idea to know when your type of contract is going to come to an end, because that will sort of cue you up. You'll know that an opportunity is most likely going to come around when that contract ends. So go online, check out what contracts we have in your industry, keep tabs, diary out or note when any existing contracts are going to end, and give yourself a reminder to check back at the end of that period, because there's probably going to be an opportunity out there when it's done. Because we buy a lot of new stuff. The city's very creative, innovative, but at the same time, there's a lot of things we just buy over and over and over for decades, right, to keep the city running. And so keep in mind, your opportunity may come along sooner or later. Just keep an eye on it. The award process. Now, when that bid is open and the lowest price is announced and you're the lowest price bidder, you might want to jump out of your chair and start celebrating. Keep in mind, we have to evaluate the bids, make sure they're all responsive and responsible. That takes time. And it also takes time to process contracts and get them awarded and actually get that business relationship in place. So your business relationship doesn't start that day we announce the bids. It takes a little bit of time. We make determinations regarding responsiveness and responsibility. We have to get a recommendation of award from the department head who's going to be your potential client. We have to make sure all the bid packages are acceptable. We have to route the final contract documents around for all the signatures that are required. We have to make sure there's adequate insurance in place so that the city is protected. If it's construction or certain work services and there's certain bonding that's required, we got to make sure that's in place. But at the end of the day, we will award the contract to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder as long as all that is completed properly. So there's a process, but we move it along quickly, and you would, if you win, get your contract within a reasonable time, as soon as possible. Now, I've talked quite a bit about if you're trying to sell goods to the city of Chicago. Now, what if you're trying to sell a professional service? Now, by law, professional services are services that are of a highly skilled nature. Examples are healthcare services like physicians, might be accounting services. It could also be information technology services like software developers. So those are examples of professional services, and there are other examples. But what we do is we have to follow a different process than just straightforward competitive bidding, because you don't just go to the lowest price vendor for professional services. And I always use the example. If you need a doctor, do you just go to the, I don't know if anyone goes, well, do you just go to the phone book and flip through and look for the lowest priced doctor to provide your health care? Probably not. You have a budget, we all do, the city has a budget. So what you try to do is you try to find the best doctor at the best value, right? You may not need the most expensive doctor, and you probably don't want to go with the least expensive doctor, but somewhere in between there's a balancing act where you, within your budget, figure out what's the best value. And that's how we approach professional services at the city through the RFP process. So the process begins the same. We advertise the opportunity. You're going to see it in the same places where you'll see competitive bids advertised over $100,000. But the difference is we're not asking for just the lowest bid. We're asking vendors to submit proposals. A proposal is a persuasive document telling us why you're the best vendor at the best value to perform the project. When you submit your proposal, we form evaluation committees. We evaluate not only the written proposal, but we also may bring in the vendors for questions and answers. There might be a presentation. There's going to be a score, and the evaluation committee will forward the score to the head of the department, who's going to be the customer. They will recommend whether or not to concur with the score that the evaluation committee has come up with. But at the end of the day, we're going to award an agreement. It's basically a contract for those professional services. Okay? But the process is slightly more subjective than just that lowest price. And the reason is, again, goods, once you have a good that's on the market, right, there's usually a number of vendors that can sell that same good. And other than maybe different colors, a pencil is a pencil is a pencil, right? So we don't care necessarily if we buy pencils from one vendor versus another by law. We just want to get those pencils at the lowest price. But as I mentioned earlier, healthcare services are a little different, so we follow a somewhat more subjective process. So we go through the RFP process, and we ultimately will award to the highest rated and ranked respondent. I mentioned professional services. I keep emphasizing it's professional services when we're talking about RFPs, because work services are services that are considered by law to be somewhat different than professional. They don't require the same degree of skill or perhaps credentials or same degree of licensing that professional services require. Now, work services include security guards, landscaping services, and there's a lengthy list of examples I could provide you. They are just as valuable to the city. We appreciate the work services as much as we appreciate the professional services. It's just by law, they're more common in nature, and as long as work service providers have the licensing and the basic training to perform their jobs, we pretty much can go to the low bidder. It's not as critical that we find that balancing act of value with price. So we can go through the process by competitively bidding work services. So those are the differences between work services and professional services. But what if we need, getting back to professional services, what if we need a pool of vendors on call to provide professional services? An example is, let's say, engineers for road construction. A lot of things can happen with road construction. For example, roads can deteriorate faster than we thought, and suddenly we have to do work at an earlier time than we had anticipated, or that the Chicago Department of Transportation had anticipated. There might be all of a sudden an abrupt form of funding from the federal government. They all of a sudden at the federal level want to fund infrastructure projects, and we didn't know the money was going to be coming in earlier planning, but all of a sudden now there's transportation funds, and we want to make sure we use that to work in accordance with the interest in improving our infrastructure in the city. So what happens? That work, maybe it's the deteriorating road, or maybe it's the funding that has a certain time limit on when we can use it. We need to have the work started and processed as soon as possible. But I talked about this whole process with soliciting opportunities, right? You have to prepare the bid packages. We have to put them in the paper for a certain amount of days. We have to form evaluation committees. Well, sometimes having that long process might make us miss the window of opportunity of getting work done. So instead of getting that process started when we know projects are going to be coming in, sometimes we have pools of vendors that we've already qualified and that are at the ready for when these projects come along. And we form these pools through an RFQ process. It's request for qualifications. The start of it is the same way as competitive bids or RFPs. We advertise, you come down, you pick up the package, the solicitation package. But instead of asking for a low bid, and instead of asking for a proposal, we're asking for you to submit qualifications to get into the pool. And qualifications are basically like, we're asking you for your corporate resume. Now, it could be a simple scope of work for the ultimate pool. So what you submit might be short and sweet with just enough detail to give us your qualifications. You might be a small company, so it might be brief. On the other hand, it might be, for example, Department of Information Technology might have task orders for enterprise systems, massive projects on an ongoing basis, and large IT companies might come in and they might submit binders of qualifications, all their key personnel, their backgrounds, projects they've performed for Milwaukee, City, New York City. So qualifications will vary. You should make them appropriate to whatever the scope of work is and to what your company size is. But please keep in mind it can vary from small to large submittals. Now, it's a method used to solicit qualifications from companies, as I mentioned. It is typically for vendors that have a high degree of technical expertise and knowledge in a specific discipline. We pre-qualify through a similar process as the RFP. We have evaluation committees. They will score your qualifications. Your score will go to the commissioner of the potential customer department for a recommendation. And at the end of the day, if you're qualified, you'll be put into the vendor pool. When that happens, you might get work right away. You might not get work right away. Master consulting agreements, which is the type of contract you'll get when you're in the pool, they last typically for several years. You might not get work till your second or even your third year. There's no promise of work. But at least you're in the pool, and during the period of that master consulting agreement that keeps you in the pool, you're in a pool of vendors that are exclusively able to get work within the scope of that opportunity. Now, when the projects come along in the form of opportunities, they will be project specific. So I use the CDOT, Chicago Department of Transportation example with roads. And say you're an engineer and you're in the pool. Well, you might get notice the city is working on a section of Milwaukee Avenue between, let's say, Caldwell and Devon. And what will happen is vendors from the pool will be chosen to do work, maybe one, maybe more, and they will get a task order. A task order is a mini contract for specific project work. You will perform the work in accordance with that project task order, and when you're done with that task order, you go back in the pool. And you will be eligible for maybe another project when it comes along for that pool. And then maybe a year later, there might be some work that's offered for another section of Milwaukee Avenue. We know Milwaukee Avenue the long street that starts in the city, and I think it goes to the state line. If not, it goes pretty close to Wisconsin. That is a road that, once you get started, if you finish some work, and by the time you're done repairing Milwaukee Avenue, you probably got to start all over again, right? Because it's such a long street. So at the end of the day, you're getting task orders, getting work, finishing that work, going back in the pool, hopefully getting more work, doing the work, back in the pool, and at the end of the day, the master consulting agreement will live its course and terminate, and then we'll put out another solicitation to get a new pool created once that pool has run its course and the master consulting agreement for that pool ends. So that's more or less how the RFQ process works through the Department of Procurement Services. Now, job order contracting. I'm going to flag really quick. I'm not going to cover in great deal job order contracting. Why? Because based on my experience with the workshops, there's probably a small portion of you that are actually in construction, so I won't force everyone else to endure job order contracting discussion. Also, there's a workshop on JOC, taught by the deputy over our construction and architecture and engineering unit. And that deputy has a high level of expertise in job order contracting. If you're in construction and you think you're interested in job order contracting, I encourage you to attend that workshop. But basically, job order contracting is typically for small to medium-sized projects. It's a method used to solicit qualifications from companies who possess a high degree of expertise in a specific area. There is a price book that was created. Now, what happened, the reason JOC was created was it was found at one point that construction can typically be broken down into various tasks. And what occurred is a price book was created that basically cataloged those various tasks that make up a typical construction project. That price book with prices for each task is then used by vendors, and those vendors really compete like a competitive bid. But what they do is they provide discount off those prices, and then we compare those discount off prices per task and ultimately award through competition. Now, if you're not in construction, that you probably just took a little snooze. But if you're in construction and you think you're interested, please feel free to go to the workshop. It's a full workshop on JOC. It'll provide a great amount of detail for you. Okay, a little more detail there on the JOC program. I'll give you a second to take a look at it. Okay. I'm going to get back a little bit. Now, there's a whole workshop on certification, but I just wanted to put it up there in a slide. These are the various types of certification that exist. Remember, MBE, WBE, BEPD, DBE, ACDBE. Now, generally, some important notes about certification. Businesses must be at least 51% owned and controlled by a minority, women, or other disadvantaged individual to be eligible. There are other eligibility requirements, but this is one of the threshold questions as far as eligibility for certification. Under the BEWBE program, similar requirement. Now, we take contract monitoring and compliance very seriously at the City of Chicago. Now, when you have that contract in place, say you were successful through one of the various types of process that I discussed earlier, you won an agreement or a contract through an RFP, or you're doing work on task orders through that resulted from an RFQ, or you won a competitive bid, and you have this contract, okay? Who's your contract with? Your contract's with the City of Chicago, but there's typically a lead agency or lead agencies on your contract. So you might be servicing or have a client who is either one department at the city or various departments. Now, you might be wondering, who are all these departments? And I think it's shocking sometimes how many departments it takes to keep the city operating. Right? There's, again, a lot of moving parts to keep the city moving. If you want to know who your potential customers are, go to cityofchicago.org/procurement. go to the top menu, click on Government. There'll be a drop-down menu, and it'll list in several columns all the city departments. So you're going to see Chicago Police Department, you're going to see Chicago Department of Transportation, Fire Department, and the list goes on and on and on. And there are links in that menu that takes you right to each department's homepage. Just like we have a homepage /procurement, each department has its own homepage. It's a good idea, if you're going to do business with the City of Chicago, go to the various departments. You think sometimes you know which department is buying certain things, but you might be surprised. There might be another department that's buying something you offer. So this is not really a procurement idea or advice to you so much as it is just business intelligence for you. You can get an idea by going to these departments, seeing what are the things that they're focusing on right now. That'll give you an idea of what it is they're buying. There might be some related stories. There might be just some background information. You can gather information and figure out who your client departments are going to be. Also, I think it was mentioned earlier, and I think there's a copy outside, we have a buying plan that the City of Chicago puts out. The buying plan is something that our departments started putting together several years ago. We reached out to all the departments, and we asked them to provide us what their expected buying plans were going to be for the upcoming year. Now, it's a projection. It's not a commitment, but what it is it allows us to put into one book what all the different departments were planning to buy for the upcoming year. That is available to you. It is a good source, again, of business intelligence, something that you can look to and figure out what departments are buying and figure out potentially what quarter of the year they may potentially be buying those items. And that'll allow you to time up. Ideally, you check our department's webpage every day and look for opportunities. But you are running your own business, you may not be able to do that. So by gathering this information, it might give you a way to hedge your bet, hedge your time, so that you know when to check our website to make sure you're current on the city's purchasing needs. Now, as far as once you get that contract into place, whether you got that contract through a competitive bid, RFP, RFQ, at the end of the day, it's a business relationship. And the way it works is you've promised to deliver what that contract, what it is that the contract you want, to deliver what that contract says you're going to deliver it. Where it says you're going to deliver it, how it says you're going to deliver it. And when it needs to be delivered, you'll know, because not Department of Procurement Services, but the department that is the lead department or one of the other participating departments, they will send an order to you. It's just like a regular business. We can call it a release, and it'll specify what it is that we want to buy on any given day, or what the department wants to buy. You will deliver the goods or services in accordance with your contract to the department that asked for it. When you deliver it, they'll make sure it was delivered properly. And when it was delivered properly, they will notify you that they have accepted, and they will notify the comptroller that you delivered. How will they notify the comptroller? After you've delivered, you will invoice the department. You will send your invoice to the department. And when the department receives your invoice and they double check, they made sure you delivered to the right location, you delivered what they asked for, they will send that invoice to the comptroller, and the comptroller pays you, the vendor. Now, it doesn't sound much different from that point on than a private sector business relationship. I wouldn't think. From that point on, it's very similar. Now, a couple things worth noting. You may deliver and disagree with the department when they tell you it's not what we wanted. It does happen. You might make a delivery, or you might have provided services, and you submit your invoice and the department says, take it back. It's not in accordance with the contract that we have. And you say, yes, it is. Look right here. And there's a disagreement. If you have a disagreement, then you can come back to us, the Department of Procurement Services, and you can file a dispute. Now, there are dispute procedures. So make sure, if you believe you have a dispute, that you go to cityofchicago.org/procurement, go to the policies and procedures section, and there's a dispute set of policies and procedures. Follow those if you believe you have a dispute. Now keep in mind, if you keep delivering things the city that are not in accordance with the contract, the city can also file a dispute and say, look, our vendor's not performing in accordance with the contract. Not only are we not paying them, we want you to send a cure letter telling them to start acting in accordance with the contract. So it's a two-way street, the dispute rule. So keep in mind that that is one way we resolve disputes. But at the end of the day, we just want a good business relationship. The client departments, you the vendors, everyone just wants to do business smoothly. And what we do probably best is we try to mediate the disagreement. At the end of the day, try and reach some type of resolution that's fair to everybody. Gets the city what it wants, gets the vendor paid if the vendor is delivering in accordance with the contract. And so we try to mediate that process as best we can. Now, we do monitor. Now, if you're delivering, it's not just delivering those goods and services. There might be MBEWBE participation requirements. When you're a prime, if you have obligations to bring on MBE and WBE subs, you will report those payments to us. We want to know that MBEs and WBE firms are being paid as they're supposed to be in accordance with the contract. So there's a system that allows us to monitor whether payments are being made to subs. And we do take that seriously as far as our monitoring and our compliance. We ensure that compliance with Chicago residency ordinance is completed. We also make sure there's equal employment opportunities on city contracts. As far as Chicago residency ordinance, contract must be estimated at $100,000 or more, funded by the City of Chicago, and 50% of the total work hours must be performed by actual residents of the City of Chicago. And then for equal employment opportunity, in order to promote equality of opportunity for minority and female personnel on city-funded construction projects, an award criteria determination must be inserted into each contract. And we do insert equal employment provisions into our contracts. Bidders are invited to propose minority and female employee utilization goals as well. So the message is this: when you're doing business with the City of Chicago, we want everyone bidding, everyone proposing, everyone submitting qualifications to have an equal opportunity. We run the process with integrity. You have expectations, and we will meet those expectations through our process. And then if you are not able to bid as a prime, keep in mind, you can also do business with City of Chicago as a subcontractor, including MBE and WBE firms. But you don't have to be an MBE or WBE firm to be a subcontractor. If you're not ready to bid as a prime, maybe you're a startup, maybe you're a small business, maybe you just don't want to be a prime contractor, maybe you just want to do a portion of a project. Subcontracting is a great way to either get your feet wet or to be involved in city business without taking on the primary role of being the prime contractor. Events like this are a great way for subcontractors to network. There are other workshops. We also have a Procurement Expo. So if you're interested in subcontracting opportunity as a vehicle for getting involved in city business, use these events not only to learn about the process, but also to network. It's a great idea to exchange business cards, talk to each other. You don't know the person sitting right next to you might be a prime contractor in the same industry, and you may have found yourself an opportunity without ever having checked our procurement webpage. But I'll encourage you to do that as well. Ways to achieve compliance. A prime can be an MBE, WBE, or DBE. You can be a joint venture. That's when two companies join forces. So you might see a project where you don't have the capabilities to complete all the work, but you want to be a prime. You don't want to be a sub. There's another firm out there that is complementary to yours. They provide a scope of work within a big project that's available, but not all of it, and they want to be a prime. You can form a joint venture and bid as a joint venture as a prime and get projects that you otherwise might not be presently capable of performing. So joint venturing is an opportunity. Subcontracting a portion of the work is another way to get participation, as I mentioned. Also, you can get participation through purchasing materials that are used in performance of a contract from an MBE, WBE, or DBE firm. I mentioned reporting requirements. There are monthly subcontractor payment certification forms. Weekly certified payrolls are looked at, and waivers of liens as well. Prime contractors are responsible for submitting such documents. There's a separate workshop on this, so I'm not going to get into the details, but there are programs for small business initiatives. If you are a small business in construction, come to the programs and bid incentive workshop that I put on. Diversity credit program as well, where you can get credit for utilizing MBE and WBE firms on non-public projects. There's also the Mentor Protege program where larger companies can mentor smaller companies for certain projects. There's bid incentives for small business enterprises, veteran-owned business enterprises owned by people with disabilities, city-based manufacturers, city-based businesses, companies that utilize apprentice workers, and also when companies use alternatively powered vehicles in their fleet. I know when you read all that, you want to get maybe some additional detail to see if it applies to you. If any of those sound like they apply to you, I'll stick around afterward, talk a little bit more about it to anyone that's interested, or attend the program and incentive workshop and you'll learn more about bid incentives and programs. I have only a few minutes left, but what I'm going to do is really quick walk you through some of the things you'll find on the DPS website, and then I'm going to go through some questions and answers. For awarded contracts and modifications, you can look on our website. You can see payments that have been made to prime contractors. You can see bid tabulations, weekly bid opportunities. You can look for MBE and WBE firms if you need to find them on a directory at our website. There, you can see what bid incentives are available, and you can look up policies, rules, and regulations, as I mentioned. This is all at cityofchicago.org/procurement. If you want to look up old contracts, just go to cityofchicago.org/procurement. There's an icon at the top, middle of the page. It says awarded contracts. Click on that. It'll take you to a window. It's already, by default, set for City of Chicago. Submit that you want to go there. And there's a search engine. You can look for awarded contracts. You can look for economic disclosure statements from existing and past vendors, bid tabulations. There's a whole number of items that you can find on that search engine. You can search by vendor name, contract number, the name of the department you want to look at, specification number, even the award amount of contracts, as well as the dates that the contracts existed. You can see economic disclosure statements and other records. You can see how contracts have been amended or modified over time, and payments to vendors. Lastly, bid tabulation. I think that's it. And the last note I want to point out is we are very active on social media. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook, in addition to our website. So if you want to stay connected with us, I encourage you to go online. You can find us at those social networks, and it's a way to keep current on all the information. Also, you can sign up for DPS alerts. You can get email alerts about opportunities as they come due. Thank you, everybody, for taking time to listen. And what I'm going to do now is take some questions and answers. Now, there are some questions that might be unique to you, unique to your company, or you just may simply not have an interest in asking the question in front of an audience. So I'll stick around for any questions that anyone wants to ask afterwards. But in the meantime, what I can do is I can take questions and answers now if there are any. Are there any questions or answers? Or are there any questions that I can provide answers to?